Well, I have another story of courage for you. I just heard this a few days ago, but it's not an old story, it's not an old fable. As a matter of fact, it's a true story, and this story took place just 1 week ago. And I had the story in first person from Megan Lindsay, who's a recording artist in Nashville. This is her story in her words. I was on my way to Nissan Stadium in Nashville on Sunday morning when I got a phone call informing me that my performance of the national anthem before the Tennessee Titans game would be televised nationally later that day. President Trump had already spent the day before attacking the NFL players who've been kneeling during the anthem to protest police brutality against African Americans. So, of course, news outlets and all of America would be watching. I started to get nervous because I knew what I had to do. I'm a recording artist living in Nashville. I come from a country music background, but I grew up in and around New Orleans, where all kinds of music and cultures mix. When I was 10, we moved to a tiny Louisiana town called Ponchatoula. I remember hearing the N-word for the first time at school. It shocked and saddened me. It still does. I saw racism all around me growing up. I remember getting a homecoming ballot in high school and seeing the names divided on the page. One section read black, the other white. I remember thinking, it couldn't be real. That was in 2004. Racism is still a huge stain on the heart of this country, and it's still very much alive. I see it often when I am touring with members of my band who are primarily black men. We recently played a venue where I was told that the promoter did not want to pay me because, quote, my drummer was threatening. This was at a country club in the Deep South. I was with my drummer, who was like a brother to me the entire day, and I never saw any type of aggression from him. The only threat she saw was the color of his skin. So on Sunday, even though I had been looking forward to singing the national anthem at this game for about 6 months, I knew I had to find a way to stand in solidarity with my brothers, sisters, fans, and friends who live with the effects of such toxic hatred all the time. I walked out to the middle of the field, sang the song, and then peacefully locked arms with my boyfriend and took a knee. I took a knee for those who are mistreated, beaten down, and disregarded in this country. I took a knee because every movement needs allies, and I knew that someone who looks like me and comes from my background needed to do it. When you're white, it's easy to disregard racism and not see your own privilege. Instead, I wanted to use my privilege and my platform to shine a light on systemic racism and social injustice. My decision may hurt my career, but it was the only choice for me. This cause is more important than my record sales.
So I've recently learned that I am a 6 on the Enneagram. For those of you who know the Enneagram, you now understand me a whole lot better. For the rest of you, the Enneagram is a typology of 9 interconnected personality types. And the only thing you actually have to know for the purposes of this sermon is that 6s are in what's called the fear triad. The fear triad. That sounds terrible, right? Yeah. So what that actually means is that the emotion that I go most naturally to is fear. And it's absolutely true for me. Whenever I get asked about what it is that I'm most afraid of, there are so many things that come to my mind that I can never decide which one to name. So is it spiders or snakes or airplanes or public speaking? or something I haven't even thought of yet? If you want to know the worst case scenario in any given situation, you can always ask me. I will have thought of it. And so, I may not stand here before you as an expert on courage, but I am definitely an expert on fear. Now, everyone reacts to fear in different ways. Sometimes people talk about it as fight or flight. When faced with something that you're afraid of, do you naturally run away, retreat, or do you face it head on, actually moving towards that thing that you fear? There's a silly poem by Shel Silverstein about Barnabas Browning, who was clearly a person who flees in the face of fear. It goes, Barnabas Browning was scared of drowning, so he never would swim or get into a boat or take a bath or cross a moat. He just sat night and day with his doors locked tight and the windows nailed down, shaking with fear that a wave might appear, and cried so many tears that they filled up the room and he drowned. So obviously, not facing his fears didn't go well for Barnabas. And it rarely goes well for any of us. My experience has been when I am facing something I fear and I choose to do nothing, I end up regretting it later on. I wonder, could I have handled it? Could I have gotten over my fear? What did I miss out on? So even though my natural instinct might be to stay away from those things I am afraid of, I find that the reality is that life is more worth living when I am able to face my fears, when I'm able to choose courage. In our story about the Cowardly Lion, we meet a character who assumes that his natural instinct is to run away from fear. He bemoans his lack of courage, and yet he doesn't just shut himself up in a house, staying away from everything that he fears. He actually joins this band of people who he's never met before to journey down the yellow brick road, facing all kinds of challenges along the way. He chooses courage, even as we continue to call him cowardly. And so when the wizard gives the Cowardly Lion that courage medal, he's not actually giving the Cowardly Lion anything that he doesn't already have. He's simply changing the narrative, acknowledging the courage that the lion has shown thus far, and helping the lion to recognize the courage that was already in his heart. It makes me wonder whether we need to change the narrative about courage and fear more often. There's this idea that out there that courageous people aren't afraid of anything, that courage and fear are somehow the opposite ends of some spectrum. If that's the case, where are these people who aren't afraid of anything? I have to ask, is there anyone in this room who has never been afraid? Good. I didn't think so. Courage is not about skipping over fear. It's about acting in the face of fear. It's about choosing to move towards the things you fear rather than running away. And sometimes it's about pretending that you are not afraid so that you can make it through something you otherwise might not be able to do. Just like that courage badge made the Cowardly Lion feel more confident that he could face his fears, so too must we sometimes give ourselves a boost, declaring ourselves courageous even when we feel anything but. Activist Jamila Jones tells a beautiful story about putting on a courage badge and adding a verse to the beloved civil rights anthem, "We Shall Overcome." Jamila was just a teenager when she came to the Highlander Center in 1958. The Highlander Center, then known as the Highlander Folk School, has long been a training ground for social justice leaders. One night, when many young activists were gathered together for a movie night in one room, the Highlander Center was raided by police. They had actually turned off the power from the city, leaving the center in total darkness. Jamila and others who were gathering were sitting wherever they happened to be when the lights went out. They couldn't see each other and had no way of knowing whether their friends were okay. All they could see were waving billy clubs and the shining of guns in the policemen's holsters. They were told to stay seated and be quiet as the police searched the center. But from the darkness, Jamila began to sing. We are not afraid. Slowly, the others joined in. Can you help me? We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we are not afraid today. Thank you. As people around the room joined in, as you just did, they could hear one another's distinctive voices and knew that each person who began to sing was safe. Jamila talks about hearing her sister's somewhat off-key voice join in at one point and breathing a sigh of relief. They got louder and more confident as they sang, and it was that singing that got them through the night. It was not a true statement that those students were not afraid in that moment, but it was aspirational, kind of like that Cowardly Lion's courage badge. Was he actually less fearful when he was wearing the badge? No, but he did manage to find strength and courage through his fears. Did those students actually stop being afraid when they started to sing? No. But the singing gave them strength and courage, even through their fear. They changed the narrative with that song, choosing courage in the face of fear. Every one of us has the power to change the narrative. Every one of us has the power to choose courage. So how do we get the strength to choose courage, right? How do we actually do this? Well, it seems that we get it from one another. Think about Barnabas Browning sitting there alone in his house. And then think about the Cowardly Lion and the way that he transformed once he became one of a group. Once Dorothy and Toto, the Tin Man and the Scarecrow were journeying beside him and joining him in facing his fears, he started to act a lot more courageous, didn't he? And what about those young activists at the Highlander Center? One person singing alone has some power, but when all those voices joined together in song, the power was enough to sustain them through their fear. This summer, I went swimming in the ocean with a friend. We were at a place where the best way to get into the water was to leap into a 25-foot deep part of the bay off of a wooden dock. Now, this is not my style. I am the creep into the water hoping it starts feeling less cold type. And so when the lifeguard told us that the best thing to do would be to jump, my first thought was, no way. All of the ways that this could turn out badly started running through my head. That worst case scenario thing. And then my friend said, let's do it together. And somehow, I still don't know how, she got me to agree. So we got a running start, and we leapt in together. And you know what? It was great. It's freezing, but it was great. There is no way I would have jumped into that water on my own. But with someone beside me, it was a lot easier to choose courage. Over the past week, we've seen even more evidence of this in the news. Dan shared with us one story of someone taking a knee, but it's been all over, hasn't it? Last year, football player Colin Kaepernick made waves when he began going down on one knee during the national anthem at the beginning of each game to protest the ongoing oppression of people of color in this country. When he began, it was a solo protest, like one voice singing alone. But this fall, as Kaepernick seems to be paying for his protest by being unable to get hired for this year's football season, people around the country are joining in. Last Sunday, NFL players from several teams knelt during the anthem, some locking arms as they did so. High school teams are joining in as well, with some players actually getting kicked off their teams for doing so. A 6-year-old in Florida knelt for the Pledge of Allegiance in his classroom and was reprimanded by his teacher. Each person choosing to go down on one knee for these protests is choosing courage, and each person knows that there may well be consequences for doing so. I have to imagine that each person who sees someone else on one knee as well gets a little more courage from knowing they are not alone. Those NFL players who locked arms as they knelt knew that there were people beside them that were choosing courage too. It makes it easier. We offer each other courage when we say, let's do it together. It's another way of putting on that courage badge, of declaring aspirationally that we are not afraid. It's another way of changing the narrative. How do you need to change the narrative in your life? Where is it that you wish you had a little more courage? What do you fear, but wonder what it would be like if you ran towards the fear rather than away from it? Whatever that place is in your life, imagine that you had a courage badge just like the Cowardly Lion. You can even make yourself one if it helps. Find some friends to journey with you as you move towards that which you fear. Maybe you'll sing together. Will you sing with me one more time? We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we are not afraid today. It helps a little, doesn't it? And you probably won't actually be any less afraid when you do any of these things. But maybe, with your courage badge shining proudly, with friends by your side, and with your voice rising up into the silence, you will find that strength that you never knew you had, even though it has always been there, and you will choose courage. As Donna Markova writes, "I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear of falling or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allow my living to open me, to make me less afraid, more accessible, to loosen my heart, until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise. I choose to risk my significance, to live so that that which came to me as a seed goes to the next as a blossom, and that which came to me as a blossom goes on as a fruit." May it be so for all of us.
Put on your face, know your place. Shut up and smile. Don't spread your wings. I could do that, but no one knows me, no one ever will. If I don't say something, if I just lie still, will they see that monster? Will they run away? But if they let them hear what I have to say, I can't keep quiet. No, no, no. I can't keep quiet. No, no, no. A one-woman riot. No, no, no. I can't keep quiet for anyone. Not anymore. 'Cause no